Welcome back to another edition of the Balas and Skene Show. I'm Chris Balas. With me, five-time Big Ten champion Doug Skene, and all Big Ten. You know what? Five-time Big Ten and all Big Ten in 1992, and former New England Patriots. So I'm having a hard time, man. I'm operating on very little sleep here, coming back from the West Coast, and I really don't know what time it is.
This is what the Big Ten has done to you, Balas.
It is, and it
These
sucks.
West Coast road trips, they must suck.
I will say this: it was a lot of fun, and Washington's a very cool venue. I don't think you guys ever played there you played them obviously in the Rose Bowl a couple of times, but Seattle, it was kind of fun. And what was not fun was the football game, Skene. And, I had this sneaking suspicion when we were making our staff picks. And I said, I'm going to go with my heart this week because I really feel like this is, these guys, there's some championship DNA here. This is not a great football team they're playing. They came out, though, got punched in the mouth. Credit Jack Tuttle for giving them a spark. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of the same issues that's been plaguing this team that doomed them. And it's the turnovers. You cannot turn the ball over twice, give them short fields. What's the old adage, man? You turn it over once, there's a 25%. What is it?
50%. Turn the ball over once.
Okay.
Statistically, turn the ball over once, you have a 50% chance of winning. Turn the ball over twice, that goes down to a 25% chance of winning. And then obviously 3 or more, statistically, you have a 0.0 chance of winning. So we did the twice thing, and then all of a sudden, you're out. You're just done. We did 3, right? There was 3. There was Orgy. Didn't Orgy have a fumble?
No, there were only 2. I think they were both Jack Tuttle, and
Jack Tuttle. So it was a pick and the fumble. Okay, so chances of winning 25%.
Yeah,
Michigan didn't win, so statistically, that one goes into that bucket as well.
Yeah,
and the thing that stood out, Balas, in the first part of that football game was the offense was just not very good. Still, with Orgy running the offense, there's no passing game to speak of. And the thing that even after Tuttle came in, there was clearly a spark. The offense moved. But what started to stand out to me watching the Michigan offense operate when it came to the passing game, and let's not even talk about protection. We won't talk about that yet. But what stood out to me is the quarterbacks are staring down Colson Loveland.
Yeah.
They just, wherever that kid is where the ball is going. And defenses know this. With the exception of the 1 3rd and long over the middle to the young receiver, which was beautiful. Yeah, Walker. Beautiful play. I'm like, who's that? And how do we do more of that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And yet it didn't come around. It's just like these quarterbacks, all of them just looking for Loveland. And it's like, God, there's got to be other choices out there, but apparently there's not.
No, and not a whole lot. And you don't see guys getting open. If you watch the film and you watch the routes, and there's usually a defender or 2 right there in the area, and Colston Loveland gets open anyway. And Kirk Campbell, Michigan's offensive coordinator, said this last week. He said, you know what? He was open every time but one when we schemed, because that's the guy they want to go to. And it's understandably so. He's not just their best tight end. He's their best receiver. At the same time, somebody else has to emerge.
Right. Now, what does that say? If your passing offense revolves your first and second choice is your tight end, then that's just says something about the rest of your receiving core, right? We're not where we need to be offensively in the passing game to be dynamic and diverse enough to make a defense wonder where the ball is going. And as I'm watching the football game, I'm just thinking to myself, how easy must this offense be to defend? Yeah. How easy must this be? You can go after the quarterback with 4 guys most of the time, throw a blitz in there. There's a pretty good chance you're going to get some pressure, going to get a hit on the quarterback. And then the ball comes out, chances are it's going to the tight end. So let's just focus on him until further notice. And so that's the frustrating part, because they should be better than this, in my mind, Balas. At this point, we're halfway through the season. And just as the television broadcast put up there, they put the NCAA stats up there, the same ones that I look at every week. We're as bad offensively passing-wise as Army and Air Force in the United States. We're just that bad. And so if that's going to continue, then these are the kinds of results that you're going to see.
When I knew I was going to lose staff picks here was when I saw the pregame injury report. And I understand that injuries are part of the game, but when you don't have Miles Hinton, when you don't have your starting center, Dom Jadis, and I think Greg Crippen did okay. We'll talk about him in a minute. When you don't have Derek Moore on the edge, when you don't have your backup linebacker, Jimmy Rolder, who might have been your second best, at sometimes your first best linebacker out there. And we can go right down the list. Amir Hall, they missed him. With Jair Hill out there. We'll talk about him too. And for God's sake, what was up with the cleats? You know what? I'm sorry, but
it's
and
a field turf field.
What?
It was field turf field. It's the same football field they have across America. Right. It's a plastic field with shredded rubber and sand. It's the same one we have in Ann Arbor.
Right.
Why are our guys falling down all over the place and their guys aren't?
Right. And you should have another option, right? If you see it, then maybe, go get the longer spikes or whatever it is. And, but you know what, get the metal spikes for God's sake, for old time's sake, when you're stepping on a guy's hand and some guy's losing a finger, trying to tackle you. That's when football was football, back when Doug Skene played,
Yeah,
so
right.
That's what I'm waiting to see. But yeah, that was, what that cost him. It was Donovan Edwards missed a hole and slips. Otherwise, he might have a touchdown. He said, I was going yard. And I asked him about it. That was my first question, was what was going on with the spikes? And Sharon Moore kind of looked at me like I had lobsters coming out of my ears or something. But Donovan goes, man, it was Vegas or something like that. And I had no idea what he meant by that. And I'm like, maybe somebody was squirting something slippery on the bottom of your shoes. I don't know. So you wouldn't cover. I had no idea what he meant by that, but he said, no, he goes, there's no excuse. I got to stay on my feet and hit that hole. But it wasn't just him. It was Jair Hill. And it was all kinds of guys slipping and sliding out there. And I'm thinking, man, do they have faulty gear here or something? They're supposed to be getting the best of the best, right? So they got to do something about that.
So if your footwork is solid, if your footwork is where it should be, then chances are you're not going to be slipping and sliding. So I don't know, Balas. I agree with Donovan. It's a lame excuse. Why are we even talking about this? It's ridiculous that our guys are slipping and that's why we lost. No, I'm not buying that for a second. We lost because you turned the ball over twice and we don't have a passing game worth of shit. That's why we lost.
Yeah, it's funny when you see your backup quarterback comes in and you're all excited. And I'll say this, it looked like they had a guy who had played the position before anyway, right? You could kind of sense that, okay, this is their best option if he's healthy. And then you look at the final numbers, 10 of 18 for 98 yards and a touchdown and an interception. Now, he made some good plays, and I am not going to deny that. And he looked good at times scrambling. He was going to his second and third reads, and I thought that was fantastic. You could see the arm strength at times as the game went on, especially on the interception. It didn't look like, it almost looked like he was laboring to throw a little bit. And I don't want to speculate on injuries or anything like that, but this guy is.
I didn't see that, Balance. What I saw was a ball that was thrown behind. It was just a bad throw.
Yep. Yeah. A bad throw. And he hasn't started a game in how many years, right? So I'm not making excuses for him. Turnovers are turnovers. At the same time, he did some good things and he gave him a spark. 3 straight drives. And of course, when you've got a guy in Alex Orji who can't throw at all, anything's going to look good, I guess. But to me, I thought, okay, at least there's some hope for the future here if Tuttle stays healthy. Am I wrong?
Well, there's hope for the balance of this season. Is that what you mean by the future?
That's what I mean by the immediate future. Yeah.
So, let's just say Tuttle stays healthy and we don't turn the ball over. We're still a long way from a fully developed passing attack. And so, okay. And I understand Tuttle only got 2.5 quarters in there, right? So he throws for just under 100 yards while he's in there. And I think Alex had, I don't know how many yards, 15, 20 yards of offense. Okay, so we had 120 yards of passing offense in that game. As in my staff pick, I said we need to rush the ball for 200 or more. We got 174-ish, 175, somewhere in there.
Yep.
But the killer is the turnovers every single time. You can be an outstanding football team. You turn the ball over twice, you lose.
Yeah.
And just look at Alabama, right? They had a couple turnovers. You just can't do that and expect to win. But it magnifies when you're the 129th ranked passing offense in America. The margin of error is like this.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the offensive line and the protection. It seemed to me that, well, 2 things, and Jed Fish said it at halftime, Washington's head coach. He said, well, they got a quarterback in there now, essentially, so now we got to change the way we defend. We actually have to defend the pass because Alex Orji was, he's telegraphing guys and he's getting balls knocked down at the line of scrimmage that, are hitting guys in the chest almost. So now Jack Tuttle had one too on a wheel route to Khalil Mullings where he might still be running. It is a game of inches, right? And if you get a couple more plays, if you get that Donovan Edwards run, right? If you get the Mullings play, maybe if they call pass interference on the Marlon Klein throw where the guy's wrapped up. But you know what? There are no excuses. Calls go both ways, and you have to make plays. If you are relying on one of those single plays to beat a team like Washington that has struggled to put up points against Rutgers, against Northwestern, against defenses that on paper are a lot worse than you, right? So, I mean, it's just one of those things. So to me, but let's talk about the offensive line here a little bit and Jeff Percy at left tackle. What did you see from him standing in for Miles Hinton? It seemed to me like he had some issues at times.
Well, so for first game issues, had a false start in there, looked a little jittery at times. That's not unusual. A difficult audio environment to play in when it's a loud stadium out there and you're in your first start. I don't think it was any kind of overall disaster, Balas, but I looked at his performance and went, hey, for a first start, not bad. The problem is it was in that environment in this big of a game, and so the mistakes get magnified. Thought the kid played all right in there. There was a couple blocks where it was really, really not good, right? And just got beat on a couple, there was one running play in particular where he just lost his feet. His feet came together. You saw there was the sky cam replay from behind. His feet came together. He got narrow. The defensive lineman threw him. And when you get thrown and your feet are together, you have no balance. So therefore you fall on the ground and you're totally useless to the rest of the offense. So that happened out there, gave up some pressures, right? So, if you're playing against Arkansas State, or one of those early openers, maybe it's not magnified as much. But when you're playing in that environment in a game like this that means so much, it gets magnified more. So I didn't think that was the worst ever. And then over on the right side, young tackle there, Mr. Link, on the sack that he gave up, just overset. Just pounded way outside overset, gave the indoor read or the inside move to the defensive end. And there was no help sliding his way. So that's just a young guy mistake.
Explain overset. Explain overset in layman's terms.
Okay, so imagine you're playing right tackle, and you've got a defensive end on your outside shoulder, and you're assuming that you got to get out to take away that outside, the outside around your right hip rush. And so your pass set in the terms of offensive line play, a pass set is the position where you're going to move your body to get in position in relation to the defender and in relation to your help with your fellow line mate. Your pass set is where you're going to get your position before any contact is made. So the ball is snapped. You got to move to a spot. You got to get to a spot. And then you go from there, depending on what happens in front of you. So if you're a right tackle and you got a guy on the outside shoulder, you have to get your pass set to a position where you're on the inside half of his body. And on that snap, he set too wide. He got to the middle or the outside part, creating an inside move for him to go between him and his guard. And I didn't see any help from his guard on that play. Al-Hadi was nowhere to be found because he probably was inside. I don't remember. But clearly it wasn't slide right. He didn't have much help on his inside hip. So the Washington defender sees a huge window open, and he cuts inside and makes the play. And so that's just a tiny little mistake that young linemen make, and you overset it. And you just can't do that in these situations and get your quarterback killed. But all these things combined is why the quarterbacks continue to get hit.
But six games in, should that still be happening?
No, it should be the chances of that happening should absolutely be lower, right? And so I don't know exactly what pass protection was on. I'd have to go back and look at the play again. But 6 games in, you've overset before in practice many times, and probably in some games earlier. You should probably know better at this point. So the rule for offensive linemen, Balas, whether you're playing right guard, right tackle, left guard, or left tackle, doesn't matter. The number one rule: never, ever, ever get beat to the inside, because it's the shortest path to the quarterback. So you're taught as an offensive lineman, you always take that away. You never give that up. And not only is it the shortest path to the quarterback for the defender, but it also creates all kinds of complications and problems when they start twisting and you got to pass guys off. And so you just always got to protect the inside. And on that play, he didn't. And again, you need to grow out of that sooner than later so you can keep for your quarterback from getting drilled and having to punt the football or turn it over.
Right. How did young Mr. Crippen do in there? I know he's standing in for Dom Jadis, and he's been neck and neck with him all year. And I thought,
I didn't think there was a major drop off. There was a little clunky. There was a little clunky stretch down there when I think there was some probably some hearing and communications issues. Sure. But every time Crippen has come in the game this year, I think you and I have agreed there's no drop off there. I think Crippen is right there. And for whatever reason, Dom gets the start, and that's fine. I think he does a fine job too. But when you see Crippen come in there, it's like, okay, I think we're fine there. We don't have any major issues. It's not like you have to curtail or change the way the coaches are calling a play or a set of plays or a series because we have this center in here. And, we can't do this and we can't do that. That's not the case with Crippen. He's just fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect, but he's just fine.
Yeah. Overall, how about run blocking? Because there were times, and they seem to kind of telegraph it, right? With Kalel Mullings, you had Donovan Edwards in there on a lot of early downs. You bring in Kalel Mullings, everybody's like, well, he only averaged 3.8 yards per carry. I'm like, well, yeah, they're bringing him in on 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 1 and everything else, and where the ball is going, right?
And there was the 1 3rd down for sure where he got hit in the backfield and he spun out and got the first down. It was the one that was contested. They were replaying it 1,000 times, but it's I guess my comment is to expand on yours a little bit. This offense seems to be really predictable on how to defend it. Mm-hmm. And so when it's 3rd and short, I know what Michigan wants to do. And you see Mullings back there. It's like, okay, here it comes. It's between the tackles, right? And that's just kind of who we are, which is fine. You can absolutely do that if you have the studs up front to just block them anyway. And you and I have talked about that many times. The great Michigan lines of the past, including last year. It's 3rd and short, goal line. We need a yard. Oh, we're going to run the football, and the entire world knows it. Well, that's fine if you can execute.
Yeah.
But when you can't, and you got guys coming free, and you got a guy playing in his first start at left tackle who's made a few mistakes, well, okay, maybe it's not such a sure thing. And so Mullings didn't have the big day that we had in other times. And I thought at times at the same time, I'll give credit to Edwards. On 1st down, he had some good runs. We were 3 or 4 or 5 yard gains. So 174 yards of rushing offense, Balas, I think is pretty good.
Yep.
Pretty good. We always say, well, if you can get north of 200, man, that's your chances of winning go way up. But I think 174 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Again, the glaring problem with this offense is its lack of balance.
Yeah.
And its lack of diversity passing wise. And that's where I think we get painfully easy to defend.
Yeah. And it was interesting. Everybody thought at the end there in the 4th quarter, it looked like the defensive line was sucking a little wind. And then they go to the passing game, right? It was a weird game in that, until about the 11:59 mark of the 2nd quarter, they had 43 yards of offense, I think, with Alex Orji. And we're like, okay, what do you do here? And I tweeted this. I said, at what point now do you go to the backup? We knew it was Jack Tuttle. We said it before the game that he'd been taking 40% of the snaps in practice and that he was probably going to be the guy. He finally got cleared and he finally came back healthy. And then you go off for those 3 drives and you're thinking, this is what offense is supposed to look like. And I give them a ton of credit in that environment for them to step up the way they did, and Jack Tuttle to go. And everybody's like, oh, he's no different than Davis Warren. And I'm like, Davis Warren wasn't going to go out there and lead 3 straight scores and bring him back down from 14-0 to 17-14. No. So I give Tuttle that credit. And then after that, Skene, it was 43 yards again of offense. So it was a tale of three games in one, essentially. You had 43, then 100 and something, and then 40 something here, and you kind of fell apart with the turnovers. You gave them short fields. Yeah. But to me, and again, and I'm going to switch gears here and talk about the defense, because this defense looks totally different than what we've seen in the last 3 years in terms of discipline, in terms of tackling, in terms of guys being where they're supposed to be. There were times that Jair Hill was not in the picture, I would imagine, when they were throwing the ball. And, excuse me, Jed Fish knew – sorry. I'm getting choked up here just thinking about it. Not really.
Drink the water, Balas.
Exactly. But there were times Jed Fish knew exactly who to go at, and he knew that he was going to go directly at Jair Hill. But it wasn't just him. Will Johnson had a terrible play at the end of that game, and Zeke Berry, the young safety, really struggled too. That secondary needs to be better.
Yeah, the secondary doesn't tackle nearly as good as it did a year ago. And that's always a sign of a great defense, is just the fundamental one-on-one tackling skills. And we've seen it many times so far in this first half of this season, where our open field tackling, not always a sure thing, and not always a guy going down. And so I agree that Will's play in the corner up there at the end of the game, when they threw right at him, I was like, man, he's better than that. This is the thing. It's just like, dude, you are better than this. How can you get? Is he sort of expecting them? Does he fall asleep over there because he doesn't get challenged as much as other places? I don't know. All I know is that when you're expected to be one of the top 3 corners in all of college football, that's not supposed to happen, and yet it did. And so the secondary, Balas, doesn't feel like it's all that tight. And at the same time, we were getting after the quarterback. Mason Graham's in there causing all kinds of problems. And so I thought the defensive line was putting all kinds of nice pressure on that quarterback. And credit to their quarterback, the Rogers kid, played a nice game. And then they bring in that freshman, Balas. And this is where it kind of made me sit up on the couch a little bit. They bring in the freshman, and he's just running base read option.
Right.
And he's just running around the end. I'm like, hello, fellas.
Contain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and there was one play in particular where the read man hesitated, which is natural. The read man he's got to keep his eyeballs on the runner. And then there was a white shirt that came around the corner, and I can't remember what number it was. And he's the guy who's got the quarterback. But he was too far inside. The quarterback keeps it and runs around the end, right around him.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a second. That's your job to keep that dude inside.
Yep.
And it's not that we don't have the talent or the physical skills or anything else. It's just like, why do we make these kinds of mistakes at this point in the season? Yeah. And it's not like they're running some different thing that we've never seen. It was base read option. Yeah. That young quarterback wasn't in there to dice up the secondary. He was in there to run 6 plays.
Yeah.
And so we had trouble stopping them. So I don't know. I'm sitting on the couch and I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, okay. And the offense is going into its normal second half sputter.
Yep.
And having been there and done this, this is the played on football teams throughout the whole career. When your defense senses that you're off, that their own offense, they run right on one side of the team. When the defense senses that the offense isn't going to do things, the danger, Balas, is that they start to check out. Yeah. That they start to lower their own expectations that, man, we're not going to score any points. So I'm not suggesting that the Michigan defense is collectively, mailing it in here. That's not what I'm saying.
It's human nature.
It is. It's human nature. There's a frustration that builds. There's anxiety that builds. And then you're out there for a long time. These guys that play on this defense have not played this, and I would love to know the statistic on this, but I'll bet you they have not played this much football in the last 2 seasons in history, in Michigan's recent, the last year's team, the one before that. They're not used to these long stretches of how much time they're on the field because the offense is punting so much.
Yeah.
And so you put pressure on those guys, and over the course of rep after rep after rep, they get tired. And when they're used to sitting on the sideline watching the offense chew off 8 minutes and go down and score touchdowns, and now all of a sudden they're out there playing those 8 minutes, it can wear on them.
Yeah, and speaking of punting, they're starting usually near midfield or the 40-yard line because Tommy Doman, for some reason, is not the Tommy Doman that we remember. And he's got to be the Tommy Doman that we saw in USC if this team is going to meet its expectations. You cannot give teams short fields all the time. And we saw it with the turnovers, right? Now, the numbers in the second half, I think they had 150 yards of total offense. Washington did, in part because their drives were shorter. Now, I'll give the defense some credit for stepping up. They seem to get a spark when it's like you said, when Jack Tuttle ignited them, right? And they go up, then all of a sudden this defense is like, okay.
The interception that we had was that was an outstanding play. Outstanding play. So that would have been a spark, and then we go out, and all of a sudden the ball's on the ground, and then it's over, basically.
Right. But but overall, it all needs to be better because when you're talking about complementary football, which is what they want to play, it just isn't working. So what's going to be interesting to me, they go down to Illinois and the guys will come back after the bye week. They'll get some bumps and bruises taken care of and everything else. But you have to wonder now if it starts creeping in here. Again, I'm not saying purposely, but maybe human nature, like, man, what are we still playing for here? And am I going to go the extra mile and throw that shoulder into somebody? I got to protect myself a little bit. That's kind of, that's not the Michigan football you and I grew up with, but that's kind of the reality of college football these days.
Well, I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
That's college football. And what we've seen in the last 5 years, the last few years especially, is when teams and players and perceived high draft pick guys across college football sense that whatever they were trying to play for their college team is over, and now it's a focus on protecting myself for the NFL. Listen, I'm not saying that Michigan's going to do this. I'm not suggesting that the players are thinking this, but this is what we've seen throughout college football now in the last few years. I personally can't stand it, all right, but I played in an era that doesn't exist anymore. It's just different, and I understand that and all the reasons why. But these are the dangers, right? And so am I going to throw myself into that pile to try to get that tackle done? Am I going to dive after that football? Hang on a second. I got a big contract coming up that I want to see. I want to be a first rounder. And these are the things that this is just what college football is now, Balas. I have said that this year, maybe it's already happened. I know it hasn't happened at Michigan yet officially. But at what point do we see young men in college football just not even finish the regular season? Not just skipping bowl games, but just say, you know what, I'm out, right? And we've already read the story out there for money at UNLV with that situation. But I think that day is coming, and I think this is probably the year we're going to see it, where not a player just has a mysterious hamstring injury and can't play, but I'm talking about just says, you know what, I'm out. I'm protecting myself for the draft. I'm done here.
Yeah.
And I hope that's never at Michigan, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's going to happen everywhere probably. And at some point, there are going to be contracts probably in college football. You hate to say it because this is not sustainable. This is free agency every year, right? Everybody's already talking about next year's Michigan football team and who they lose.
Twice a year, right?
What's that?
It's free agency twice a year.
Right.
You can hit the portal twice a year.
I think they're changing that rule. So regardless, I do believe that it's going to come to an end because they're going to do away with either the 1-year transfer rule or they're going to have contracts and things like that. So, and then you're going to have issues like, hey, you know what, you're under contract, you're going to play. College football isn't college football anymore. And I think a lot of people feel good about that, right? That kids are finally being compensated and things like that. There's that contingent. And I understand that, right? This is a violent sport. The more I see, I'll never forget 1998 was the first time, 1999 at Penn State was the first time I was on the sidelines for a college football game, right? And the violence that you see when LeVar Arrington, I think it was Anthony Thomas, LeVar Arrington. Anthony Thomas ran over a cornerback and he landed at my feet on the sideline. And just the sound of it and the look on this kid's face when they're trying to get him up, they're saying, "Oh, just a stinger, baby." And he's like, "Oh God," he couldn't feel his upper body. But so I understand that. At the same time, there was something special about playing for team and all you guys. When I did all these Where Are They Now, it's the same thing, right? It's like we didn't even hesitate to do it. Now it's a business decision.
Well, listen, I've echoed this, and after thinking it through a couple of years ago when this whole NIL thing started, great. The United States Supreme Court said these young men and women across college football and all the other sports, they have a right to earn money based on their name, image, and likeness. Makes perfect sense to me. I get it. But when they added the Wild West transfer portal in there, that's what screwed this whole thing up.
Yep.
Because that's what it turned into was the highest bidder. I'm out of here for the highest bidder because I can. And so there's no commitment to the team past 6 months. So this turns into a huge turnstile of guys just going everywhere. And now even leaving teams early because they were promised this but didn't get that. And so it's an absolute mess. This has to be fixed. As this relates to Michigan, and we start peeking over the horizon at next year, And we're going to start doing that, Balas. With one more loss, we're going to start talking about next year, and I'm sure that people are already whispering about it now. What does that look like, and how does it look, and who's going to pay the bill, and who's going to stay, and stay for what, and all this thing can get out of hand so fast. In the old days, back when I played, you knew what your roster was going to look like next year. There was certainty, and you look forward to guys stepping up, getting better, making a difference. And now those days seem to be gone, because it's like, that guy's probably not even going to be here next year.
Yeah.
He's just going to leave. And so it changes the dynamic of any team, not just Michigan. Any team in college football can absolutely fall apart in about 12 months.
Yeah. And
you can go from what we were a year ago to, looks like we're having an average year now. You know, we're on the path down to 8-4, 7-5, depending on how this goes. I'm being positive there, Balas.
I agree.
And all of a sudden, you know, flash forward a year, there's no guarantees that you're just going to be good because you wear the maize and blue anymore. Those days are gone. It's a different ball game now.
Yep, and it's going to be the haves and the haves not, and have-nots, and who's really serious, I guess, about spending money. We've seen Dave Portnoy, you know, promising $3 million for the Michigan quarterback, and I'm thinking, this is unbelievable, man. But if you want to succeed and if you want to be competitive, then that's something you're going to have to do. We've seen it with Ohio State and Oregon. Probably the class of the Big Ten this year, and those two will clash, I think, next week. As a matter of fact, can't wait to see that. That'll be fun. So, but there's no easy game on the schedule left for Michigan, with the exception maybe of Northwestern, and that includes Michigan State. Everybody's going to say, "Oh, they're terrible," so on and so forth. If they can move the ball, they're going to play with some passion in that game. If Michigan does not match that intensity, they can lose that football game, especially if Michigan State does not turn the ball over. I go to look at Illinois. Illinois hates Michigan. And this goes back to you guys. I didn't ever really understood the hatred Illinois had, and they think Michigan's a rival. And I thought, oh, that's cute, you know, so on and so forth. But going down there, that's going to be a snake pit in 2 weeks, Skene.
Listen, as long as our passing offense remains 130th in the nation, we're going to struggle to beat teams, Balas. I don't care who they are.
Yep.
And so anybody can look. I looked last night, as I often do after a loss, and I looked down the schedule and I go, ooh, if we make these kinds of mistakes, who are we going to win against as you go down the list? And the answer is probably not many of them.
Right.
If you play like that and you turn the ball over like that. So it needs to be fixed sooner than later. And Michigan finds itself, here we are again, at a fork in the road. And they got a week off now. Then we're going to go down to Illinois. That will not be a cakewalk by any stretch. Illinois plays tough trench football there. Because Brett Bielema, that's his whole style, and it's what he's always done. He'll have them ready to just doing the dogfight thing. Yeah. And so you look down the schedule, Balas. It's like, all right, I'm not sure. Yeah, but Michigan's going to have to play better than what we did on the road here at Washington, or this will absolutely be a 6-6. Hell, this could be a 5-7 team if we don't get better.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, it's funny. People are going to mock you for that, but I think you're absolutely right. So we'll see what happens.
It could be. I'm not saying they are going to be. I'm saying they could be if they don't get things fixed. Because as the season wears on, Balas, you're easier to dissect. There's more on tape to evaluate. Your tendencies are all there. You can't just reinvent yourself. You just have to be great at what you are. And last year's Michigan team, it was like the old days. We showed up. We said, here's our playbook. You already know what we're going to do. Try to stop us. And no one could.
Right.
This year's team, we're trying to do the same thing, but people are having a pretty easy time stopping you.
They are.
And so if you're going to walk the walk, you better be able to perform. So it just gets harder as the season goes on.
Yep, and it probably will continue that way. But it is a good time for a bye. They'll get some guys back, hopefully, and we'll see what happens. He's Doug Skene, Michigan's former All-Big Ten offensive lineman. Skene, I appreciate it. We'll do this again next week. We are going to try to get Aiden Hutchinson on this show. We'll see how that goes. We'll see if your name really carries weight in the Hutchinson household, like you said it did. And you said all along, oh, Aiden's like a son to me, I think.
Yeah, I know. I never said that.
All right. I may have made that up. So, but we'll see what happens and we'll see what we can do. But I appreciate your time.
All right. Go Blue.